Welcome. I'm Sean,
I'm Brad.
and this is my first watch.
My rewatch, The Wire, Season 2, Episode 5, Undertow.
Undertow. It is. What is an undertow? Do you know what that is? Is that something to do with?
That is when the water, I believe when the water starts pulling from, the tide starts pulling you in. Maybe pulling you out.
Symbolic. Okay, I get it.
It's a water metaphor.
Okay, cool.
So we're starting off, and I feel like this is finally our real true answer to what Herc had been talking about that we were listening to a few episodes ago when he joked about the white drug dealers.
Drug dealers, yeah.
I feel like this is the guy. This is our man, Frog. Frog is on the corner, and Ziggy pulls up, and he wants to get paid. They've just jumped ahead. Ziggy has bought this package that he was attempting to get for so long. We don't know anything more than that. We find out later in the scene, but right now he's pulling up on his corner with Frog. He wants his payment from the package, and he gets, I believe, $290. Ziggy says it should be $500, and Frog says the stash got hit.
Right.
Now, I thought this was really funny because this is where Ziggy, I felt like his whole dialogue changed. Money gonna be right. It's like, when you see like acting, movies about acting or TV shows about acting, and like I think of what's the Keenan Ivory Wayans movie with where all the actors are acting black, and they're
that one.
Which one?
I'm gonna get you, sucker. That one.
Yeah, I'm gonna get you, sucker. And I felt like Ziggy was playing the jive. Don't jive me, man. Money gonna be right.
Yeah, he definitely went over there trying to act his and what black is in his head, I think. So yeah, I could see that.
Ziggy has to basically just take this L, walks away, says he'll be back. Frog just says, hey, sends this little kid to go get him some chips and a soda. Ziggy gets no respect, and we quickly find out why. Before Ziggy can even drive away, Method Man pulls up with a crew.
So Method Man is our second cameo. And after you're done explaining the scene, I wanted to talk about our favorite cameos so far, because that's interesting to me. But between him and Ashley Larry, I'm starting to like it.
So Method Man pulls up. His name is Cheese, and this is where Ziggy got his package. Ziggy knows right away he tries to back up. He's trapped. He's being blocked in, and Cheese starts roughing him up, rips the coat, and Ziggy owes him a lot of money. And he does not have the money to pay. Ziggy does not have this money, so he's trying to figure out a way. They punch him in the face and make it clear that they're going to kill Ziggy if Ziggy does not pay up this money.
And now I just want to walk through that again to make sure I understand it properly. So Ziggy bought a package from Cheese, and then he gave it to Frog to sell. Frog only sold 260 of what it should have been, so now that's why Ziggy's in debt with Method Man, aka Cheese. Is that all correct?
Yeah, and the money that Frog owes in this specific instance, I think he's short, $210 in this case. Ziggy owes way more than that. He owes thousands. And that's why he tries to first pay up with his now ripped coat, which he says is worth $2,000. And Method Man laughs that off. He says, not even a black man can make this look good. And he says, if you don't have my money by Friday, you're going to be dead by Saturday. And that's pretty much how they leave Ziggy. But they take the car.
Right. That's almost their collateral, right?
And Ziggy looks up Frog and the kid are there like, what the fuck, guys? Nobody helps me. And now it's clear the situation of Ziggy's reputation with Frog on the streets. He's not cut out for this business.
Right. And it's just because he can't intimidate anyone. He doesn't have that intimidation factor. No one respects him. So it's hard for him to be a drug dealer.
Exactly. We go to our opening credits, and we got our quote, which is, they used to make steel here, no? Or they used to make steel there, no? And that's from Spiros in his conversation with Frank. But we start with Carver standing in Daniel's office in front of his desk, and right off, he's asking, why me? This is Daniel's extending the offer, the invitation to have Carver join the new detail that's going to be investigating the ports. And Daniel says, well, I figure the guy that did it to me once isn't going to be stupid enough to do it again. He's got enough shame. Yeah, I imagine you got enough shame on you from the last time. And Carver pretty much owns up to that and promises him that it'll never happen again. And he's in.
Yeah, I was surprised at first that Daniels would give him a second chance. But then once he explained himself, it does make perfect sense because, you know, he's got the hot seat on him now. He's got the eyes on him now for not being loyal the first time. So it's even harder for him to even try to do something like that again because he's already suspicious of him. So it's the perfect person to have on your team because it's not that you know you can trust them, but you know what you can trust them with. So I love Daniels is always, again, this season, he's the MVP so far. He's been making great decisions across the board. So.
And Daniels confirms also that Valchek gave him pick of the Southeastern District. So it is truly free reign for whoever he wanted. He could have picked anyone. He chose specifically Carver.
Now, are you a little disappointed that Sindor didn't make it back this season or to this detail?
Yeah, I guess that he wasn't like a number one draft pick. That's a little disappointing.
It's just interesting how when they first introduced Sindor, you know, it was in relation to Prez and it was like, oh, we need a good cop. And now he's like the forgotten guy out of the whole detail, right? I mean, even Polk I've seen, so.
It's very true, yeah.
Yeah.
He also says that the stripes on Carver's arm don't mean anything to him. So Greg's Kima is the head of the crew. And
he had a great response that I'm forgetting. What did he say? He said something like, the way it's always been or something like that?
Same as it ever was.
Same as it ever was.
Which is a wireism.
It is I could tell by the way he said it, it's a wireism. I've only heard it maybe twice, but you could tell when someone says it a certain way. It's one of them. Same thing with Good Police, you know?
Yep. Bubbles is at the Marine unit. We also get another wireism when McNulty's partner comes out and says he raised McNulty. That's what they always say when they're calling people. They say, I'm going to raise him, got to raise the detective, got to raise the judge. It means call him.
Okay, I didn't even catch that one. Okay.
Bubbles is looking for McNulty because he has to report back on his debt, his tax that he's paying on Omar for these stolen goods that he was caught with. But before that, we have a little fun with Bubbles trying to steal the grill, and it turns out Bubbles knows how to kind of tie a knot for a boat.
It's like everybody understands the boat except McNulty. It's hilarious.
McNulty pays Bubbles, but Bubbles is not happy with the pay. He kind of goes on and on to McNulty about the fact of how dangerous this was, and he did not appreciate having to go after Omar. And we talked about it last time of, you know, I don't think that Omar would be dangerous because we've seen Omar be friendly, funny, charismatic, sociopath, as I think he's described by Eileen Nathan. But Bubbles hasn't seen that sign. Bubbles knows just the reputation of Omar. And so for him, the character, this was extremely frightening. And I didn't think he was outright I didn't even know exactly what he was asking McNulty. But McNulty gives him basically all the money that he had in his stash.
Yeah, I didn't necessarily understand what Bubs was trying to get out of McNulty from it because he'd already delivered what he promised. But like you said, he ended up giving him more money, which presumably Bubs is going to use for more drugs. So,
you know, had this come last season when we were seeing Bubbles at his end and being so tired, I would maybe make that connection. But we've been so far away from clean Bubbles in these first 5 episodes of season 2 that the two don't really connect. So I am really wondering what's going on in this present day for Bubbles in his head and his sobriety, or just his stamina in general.
Yeah, I would agree.
Rawls comes in to homicide to check on the Jane Does, and Freamon wants to drop a grand jury summons on the dock workers, but Rawls decides that he's going to add Cole to the detective unit. And the other guy, I can't remember the guy's name, but they're going to add them because they claim that Beadie is really not the one, not really cut out for this so much. So they need Cole and this other cop to help with the grand jury.
Right. And then you can see that Beadie is kind of losing her value. She had a little bit of value helping around the docks, but now as the investigation gets deeper, she really doesn't have any experience. She's out of her depth, and we're seeing that as episode goes along.
But the other thing that we find out is that Freeman's going to be detailed. You kind of forget that while all these pieces are moving and Daniel's checked with Greg's, he didn't really check with Freeman, I guess.
No, Daniels kind of took Freeman, went to Rawls and spoke to Rawls, but he didn't talk to Freeman himself.
So now Freeman finds out that he's detailed, but he doesn't know where he's detailed to. So he's a little pissed. He says, "You just fucked me over?" And Rawls reveals, he says, "When I fuck you over, you're going to know."
And then almost 10 seconds later, we see Bunk kind of get fucked over, don't we?
Yeah. I wrote down the quote because it's a classic Rawls, one of those just classic Rawls line. He said, "Let me be clear. When I fuck you over, you'll know it. You'll be so goddamn certain you won't need to ask the question." So now Bunk is fucked.
Yeah.
Elena, which is McNulty's ex, soon to be ex, is showing houses, and it's Nick Sabatka and his girlfriend Amy. They're looking for houses. He had a little bit of cash, few $1,000s that he got, and we were kind of thinking this is wild. Like, this is what he's going to do, is stolen goods, and he had the whole camera thing, and this is how he's going to get his family out of his parents' basement.
At least he thought.
That's what he thought, because Elena starts showing them around the house, and we start to learn a little bit more about the neighborhood, which I thought had deeper connotation. But the fact that this apparently was Nick's, it was Nick's family. This is his aunt's house.
Yeah, so he has an emotional attachment to the property.
And he says that, or Amy says, I believe this is before she died. She got sick. Then they sold the house, and whoever bought it, that's who's now selling the house. So I kind of looked at this of more of a statement of, and we saw what the signs with the real estate that's been happening around the docks. We've heard about the abandoned buildings that Avon's been buying. This idea of the neighborhood, Baltimore, as a whole, I think, is changing.
Yeah, for sure. In this storyline, yeah.
And Nick can't afford to buy this house. I think they said $340,000 is what another house on another block went for, because Nick's thinking they're not going to get this money, right? This is just the asking, but this is nowhere close to what it's going to get. And Elena pretty much confirms, yeah, that's what we're thinking. So he just walks out, and Amy has to follow him, and she says, maybe we can rent.
Yeah, so they go back to the idea of renting. Yeah.
And I thought it was also interesting, as that's happening, we see someone pull up in a BMW to look at this house. So clearly they were completely out of their depth.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Yeah, it's clearly interesting because Nick went in there with all the confidence in the world that he's going to buy this house, and it's not the case.
Daniels is going to address the detail. Starts off with Frank Sabatka on our crime board. Lonely picture of Frank Sabatka. Freamon and Prez are going to put DNRs on the Union Hall phones. They're going to run union finances, looking at Frank Sabatka personally. And the rest of the crew, Kima, Carver, Herc, they're going to do hand-to-hands. And this is where Herc realizes that, we got to go undercover, and these are white boys. You're going to need me.
And then he gets the satisfaction of saying, you guys got to be on the roof to take the pictures. So
Freamon shows up now in the middle of this meeting, and this is where he realizes who he's with and where he's at. But it's funny because he doesn't necessarily know still who the target is. But he says, fuck it, who we chasing? And he turns around, and it's Frank Sabatka. And he fills the detail in that he and Bunk were fucking with him last week. And they're, you're thinking drugs, and they're not really sure. But he does say that Frank is not a suspect in the girls' murders. He just thinks that they have a connection to whoever may be responsible.
Right, absolutely. So Freeman's expertise is going to come into play because he's already dealt with everyone at the docks with Bunk. So he has a kind of feel for all the players down there. Not all of them, but some of them.
And Herc even says, in this fucking town, what else could it be besides drugs? Donette visits D'Angelo as she was instructed to do in jail. And she's just kind of telling him, I guess, more so reading from the script, telling him basically what the crew's going to do, what Avon, what Stringer are going to help provide for her, for him when he gets out, for their baby. There's a job on the outside, much like what Orlando maybe had, running a club, something like that, something out of the drug dealing game. But D'Angelo is very fixated on his son and not paying a whole lot of attention to Donette. But the moments of conversation between the two of them are D'Angelo telling Donette that they are playing her. They're just using her for this family. We are family stuff. And he's not really with it.
Yeah. Now, do you think his perspective comes from what he knows and what he feels based on what Avon did in the prison? And also, with Avon getting him locked up? Or do you think he kind of suspects there's something going on? I don't know. Do you think he knows more? You know what happens later. I don't. But, I mean, what can you tell me about him in that scene? Because I really felt a lot coming from D. Felt a lot of conflicted emotions and a lot of, he's almost disconnected from his reality. So I'm curious what you thought of that.
On the contrary, I thought he was very connected to his reality. Yeah. And okay. I take him at face value. I think this is us seeing that for the first time, D'Angelo is standing on his own. And him telling his baby mama that, with no pressure, no one around, that he's out of this. He's not with them. And he's telling her, don't believe this. I think that's him for the first time seeing clear. When we saw him talking last season with Chardine, he was so unsure. He was panicky. He had no clarity. He was saying, he couldn't breathe. He kept saying, and he was so calm in this, in describing essentially his wants, and that's to not be involved with the Barksdale crew, his uncle, and to make sure that Donette, again, just that she knows that she's being used. I think he sees clearly for what he's suffering for the crime that he committed, getting the years. And on top of that, what he's seen in the crew prior to going to jail, and now what he's witnessed with Avon, seeing that it's a pattern, and Avon is just not the type of person that D'Angelo wants to be. It's not in him, so anything that keeps him tied to that, he's out.
Okay, that's fair.
There's a fiend walking through the pit, and I guess the Barksdale crew, quote unquote, is trying to sell this guy their stuff in the pit, and it's called Death Grip. And someone else yells out, "Death Grip ain't shit," and then they blame it on the fiend, and they just start whooping this guy's ass.
And Beadie has to come in and regulate, right?
Yeah, it's cool because we see Poot sitting on the couch, and he's the one that kind of breaks up the fight first. But then we see Puddin, who we haven't seen since last season from the crew. He runs out and gets Beadie, and you were even saying, like, where's Beadie? What's going on with Beadie?
Beadie since that first episode. I've been begging for some Beadie. So
we finally got some Beadie. Puddin comes to get him in outside on the sidewalk. Said, "Hey, it's going down in the pit." Beadie runs in. He's like, "So we're beating people's asses for speaking the truth now?" And he makes the call that we gotta ring Stringer on this.
Right. So you could really see Beadie stepping up as a leader in the organization. It's just interesting to see going from Wallace, him, and Poot were kind of the underlings, and now they're running the corner, so or the pit. So
Nick meets Ziggy in the Union Bar and sees that Ziggy is all messed up, and Ziggy has to admit to Nick that he bought a package, but Nick pretty much knew from Ziggy's condition already. And this is where he kind of, I guess, admits a little bit, or Nick is able to guess why Ziggy went to this guy Cheese in the first place. And this is where I feel like we got to really know a little bit more about Ziggy and the way that the N-bombs are just flowing through this thing, and he's just a very irresponsible kid. He's fucked up previous packages from White Mike, as we've heard Mike say himself, and Nick guesses this on his own by saying, "This is why you didn't go to Mike this time, right? Like, you are fucked." And he says, "I can't help you, Ziggy. I already gave my money to Amy for furniture, an apartment, all that stuff." And then this is where we also get the confirmation that Ziggy owes $2,700.
Yeah. So I didn't realize, thank you for putting that together for me, that I knew he messed up the package with White Mike. I didn't realize that was why he had to buy from Cheese. I just assumed that, I didn't put those together. So that's a good note. Thanks.
And that's really the part that they jumped, was we saw him in a previous episode go to White Mike, and White Mike made it, did you fuck up the last package? Are you walking? Are you fine? Like, I didn't mess you up, so go away. And so they never even, Ziggy maybe attempted, I don't know, but they never went through that process of Ziggy finding Cheese as the alternative connection.
Yeah, it just kind of happened off camera, which is fine. It took you explaining that transition to me to understand. So
we get to check back in with Valchek and the van. It's in San Diego.
Yep.
And now Valchek is dusting the photo for Prince.
Yeah, so you see him doing a little police work still in his old age, right?
What do you think? Good? Is this goofy, funny? Do you think there's anything on this of him being able to catch the union workers by these pictures that they're sending him?
It's goofy right now, but I want to see what the payoff is. But it's super goofy right now. So
Kima also busts in, and ironically, or maybe coincidentally, she needs the surveillance van.
Right. So he says it's out on assignment, right? He loaned it out to the Eastern, right?
Southwest,
excuse me. Because they are Eastern, right?
Stringer is learning about supply and demand in school. He got an A on his paper, and he decides to pull Teach up on some business questions on what you do.
Minus, right? I think I remember that. He got an A-, right?
Yes.
So I initially, when I saw the thing, I thought he was going to come up to try to finesse a better grade. I didn't know where he was going with that. But he asked a question which relates to the drug business, which is even better.
What do you do when you have an inferior product? And the teacher gives him a little bit of a history lesson on WorldCom and changing the name to reset your branding.
Yeah, so Stringer takes this advice directly to his organization.
Mackey is the other detective that Rawls has assigned to the ports with Cole to help Bunk give out the grand jury summons to the dock workers, to all the union workers. So it's Bunk and Beadie together, and it's Cole and Mackey. And Bunk and Beadie hit the trailer with Frank. And this is where we get a little bit more personality, a little bit more fire from Frank. A little bit of fight back, I guess you could say, versus how we saw him last time in the bar, scared shitless, having a panic attack.
Yeah. This time he was rebellious, I guess, or, he was defiant in the face of Bunk and the grand jury summons. And he almost touted how Horseface is a rock and he's not going to say anything. And
he did this with a lot of charm, I thought. That, first he starts off with introducing Johnny 50, and we get this, story, just very blue collar of 50 shots for his birthday or 54 shots for his birthday, something like that. And they round it off to be poetic. But this is when he starts screaming and says, Johnny's not going to say anything. None of the guys are going to say anything. We've been pulled in front of grand juries. Every guy's been pulled in front of a grand jury. Our books have been open to the government for years. We've been through every single president in this country. The union is still standing. We're going to be standing till the end of time. And emphatic that we know nothing about those dead girls in the can.
Yeah, this was a good promo by Frank. And his sellability, the thing I like about him is that he seems to genuinely care about his guys in the union. So, that makes me, I relate to that. I like that about him, even though I don't necessarily, am drawn to him the way I'm drawn to someone like Freeman or someone like Daniels. I think the blue collar nature of Sabatka and the way he takes care of everybody is very appealing. So
the one thing that I thought came out of this was that there was a trigger for Frank in this eruption. And that was him saying, what would be the reason we would have to let those girls die in the can? But Beadie says, but that's the one that got lost. And that's where we're starting to learn a little bit about the system of checking cans and how this works and losing cans in the stack. This is a piece of the puzzle in the same way that we're trying to figure out last season, how are these drug dealers all communicating with each other?
Yeah, what are they doing with the pagers? Yeah, the cans and the pagers are almost synonymous, or parallel each other. I agree.
Great ending also, as Frank says, these 4 guys ain't working today.
Yo, Frank's the man. I mean, he's number 2 right now. It's Daniels and Frank. I like Frank, man.
But Johnny does go in for the grand jury summons.
He does. Right.
Takes him with him, so. Omar is meeting with ASA Eileen Nathan. This is what I alluded to earlier. This is on the Byrd trial for the William Gant murder. And Eileen is running through the testimony, and Omar says that he was about 50 feet from the murder. So Eileen's trying to figure this out. How do you know? How could you see the gun in Byrd's hand? And Omar says, well, I didn't. Byrd showed it to me after. And Eileen's trying to get all this straight. And after the murder, and he goes, well, which murder? Which murder are you talking about? And he shows like he's got no emotion to this. He thinks it's a joke. It's funny. And to Eileen Nathan, I think, she's trying to play sympathy for this case. She needs a sympathetic jury that's not going to be afraid. And she's trying to get the seriousness across of how dangerous this Avon Barksdale crew is and this Byrd. And Omar's making jokes.
Yeah.
And she's just very unhappy with this. And the line that she says is, or that Omar says is, when she says he committed more than one murder, Byrd did, and Omar says, fish gotta swim. Yep. And McNulty loves it. He's cracking up. So she excuses Omar, and this is where she tells McNulty that Omar is a sociopath, and regardless, she's going to put him on the stand and gives McNulty a clothing voucher.
Right. So they go across the street to go suit shopping.
Yeah, they're going to go shopping. Before that, we go to Carver and Greg's, and they're surveilling the area. Frog is dropping the N-word, sweatsuits, Tim's, wave cap, and Carver just says, thieving motherfuckers, take everything.
Yeah, Frog's going full wigger on him.
Bunk and Beadie are outside of the grand jury waiting on the testimony, and we get our prosecutor, Charlie, and he comes out, and Bunk wants to know how did everything go, and Charlie says, I've almost got one of them ready to swear that the docks are near the water.
So yeah, it just shows you how little they're really getting at all. So
just as Frank Sabatka said, and just as Nick assured the Greeks also.
that's true too, because he assured them. Do we talk about that scene where he assured them that,
that was last episode when they were on the docks.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, when they were threatening Horseface on the docks.
Got it.
When the prosecutor leaves, Bunk and Beadie are talking about maybe other ways to crack this case, and that's where Bunk brings up the prospect of a confidential informant, a CI, and asks.
Confused about what that even is, right?
Beadie knows nothing about it, and Bunk has to explain it. You got to have a confidential informant, someone you've got a previous relationship with, a history with, that you can go to and talk to about these things. And Beadie starts thinking about it, and Bunk tells her, and this is, I think, goes into the definition of good police. Of police is only as good as his informants, which means we ain't about shit.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I've never heard that before or thought of that before. But when you think about last season, right, all of the breaks in the case were made through Omar and Bubbles, right, for the most part. So yeah, and I guess D'Angelo writing some letters helped too. So yes. Having a CI, whether voluntary or involuntary, definitely helps. So
McNulty takes Omar for some clothes shopping, like you mentioned, and I think they get like $150 or something. It's a low number for formal wear, but none of this is in Omar's style. So he wants to go to another store across the street or something, or he says might be with Muffy at the club. I like seeing Omar out of the element a little bit here, much like Bubbles in Leave It to Beaverland when he went to the soccer game out in the suburbs. It's funny seeing Omar out of the street life.
It is funny, but I also wonder, is he making himself a target?
By going around with McNulty?
By going around, in these situations where he isn't necessarily. When he's in the streets of Baltimore, he has a shotgun with him, right? I don't think he can walk in the grand jury court and do that. So
very true. Kima and Carver are waiting on Herc, and this is when Herc tells them they got to get in the park. Herc walks up in a coat, nice little fur coat, and makes a deal with Frog for the Raw, and turns around and tells Carver it's all in the props. He's got a little toothpick there. They're able to listen to this whole thing because they're wired up. We've really just skipped, a lot of steps that season 1 had to go through.
For example, right?
What's that?
Like exhaustion, for example?
Well, exhaustion, also the audio equipment. They've just got the wireless body mics now, and so the idea of, Herc just being wired up is just something we already go right to in the story.
Yeah, that's true.
McNulty goes to Homeland Security, and he's still looking for his floater. He's still trying to find the family of his floater, and he tells the guy at Homeland that he feels like it's his responsibility to find the family. And the guy cannot believe it. This Homeland Security officer says, you're kidding, right?
And we see he's motivated by, that may come up later in the scene. I don't want to jump ahead, but he said it before. He's motivated by what happens to these bodies in the morgue when they don't become identified. So
Nick fills Spiros in on the grand jury. Sorry, you were right. This is this episode.
Okay.
Where he says Nick tells Spiros that Horseface and his uncle are rocks, so we don't have to worry about them at all. But tells Spiros that his uncle does want to stop smuggling. It's not safe anymore. And Spiros says that it's all a dead end. They got the guy in Philly. There's nothing to worry about. We saw that on the boat last episode.
And that's why Bunk was so mad at Bunk and Freamon, right? Because the boat's gone. They have nothing.
Exactly. Spiros says that he will meet with Frank, but Nick tells Spiros that Frank is demanding the Greek. Sergey laughs, a little weird, and Spiros then also asks about the chemicals, which he says, buy for a nickel, sell for a dime. And Nick says, right, but who wants a dime's worth of fucking chemicals? So he's very concerned about what these chemicals might be used for. He doesn't want any type of terrorist activity, bombs, things like that.
Yeah. I don't know why. I guess because of Breaking Bad bias, I automatically go to crystal meth, but thinking they're cooking meth or something. But yeah, they very well. And in this time period, it very easily could be a terrorist attack. So
McNulty is still at Homeland Security and asking about sex worker rings. And the guy at Homeland tells McNulty that in Jersey, there's a case where girls are being detained for a bust, and cannot believe that McNulty's going to do this on his day off.
Well, I haven't seen McNulty back at work other than when he Bubbles was helping him with the knot anyway. So, maybe he took a week off. So,
and this is where McNulty mentions it was almost I thought it was almost like a passing line, but this really did stick with McNulty of what happens to girls who are unidentified Jane Does or John Does, unidentified victims. They get cremated at the morgue, and he doesn't want to see that happen.
Yeah,
well, not just cremated, prodded, cadavers for medical students, all those type of things.
Yeah, they're not treated. They're treated as products, not humans anymore. And for some reason, that's what's motivating McNulty this season. That's what's keeping him involved in this case, even though it's not his case. So.
Beadie is going to take some of Bunk's advice, and she's going to go try and get her own confidential informant. And that turns out to be Maui, the bully that was picking on Ziggy last episode.
I didn't even put the two together because he looked so, in the scene with Beadie, he was a lot more bright and friendly and flirty. So I didn't even put together that was the same dude. Thank you.
Yeah, vulnerable.
Vulnerable. That's the perfect word. He was more vulnerable than messing with Ziggy. Yeah.
And there's a lot of signals in these scenes with the two of them.
Yeah.
We go back and forth, but it's very clear right away he's anxious because he wants her to come in and have some beers. And
Bacardi.
What's that?
He said or Bacardi, that's all.
Or Bacardi. And Beadie wants to have him come out and go get some coffee.
Right.
And you can see he's a little bit dejected at that moment, but he agrees.
Yeah, I mean, basically, we were inferring that they had some history, and she's capitalizing on that to make him somewhat of an informant. But as the conversation goes on, you can tell he doesn't want to snitch, but he does have a soft spot for her. So
Stringer is checking in on Donette, making sure they said exactly what she was told to say, and she's reporting back like a good soldier. And Stringer's pretty worried here.
Yeah, very much so. You can tell that D'Angelo not being down is weighing on him.
She basically, I think she told it as it was. I thought she saw it for what it was, that he was, very distant and just said, leave him alone. And, Stringer, I think his nonverbal acting is, Idris Elba's nonverbal acting is awesome. He just looks so bothered, so menaced and it's creepy because D'Angelo's son is right there playing in front of Stringer. And Stringer, just the idea of Stringer, one, being with the mother of D'Angelo's children, and now the fact that he's there with his son and he's touching D'Angelo's son, and he has these evil thoughts in his head, and just the fact he's touching his kid, and even says, "What you think, little man? Your father's bucking us," and he fabricates this conversation with D'Angelo's child, and he says, "I think you're right."
Yeah, and then and I want to know what the little baby said to him in his head, because I want to know what Stringer's about to do next. So,
what do you think? Do you have any guesses?
I mean, I just think he's gonna take him out. I think Stringer's kind of like cut and dry in that regard. Like D'Angelo is a loose end, and he wants to clean him up. Now, whether Avon is down with that is a completely different story. So,
Nick grabs I found this was interesting, the black union guy, and brings him to the drug corner where Cheese is hanging out to try and talk to him about Ziggy's issues, Ziggy's debt.
Yeah.
I don't know. I thought this was goofy as fuck.
Just them bringing him there?
Yeah. The guy does not want to be there, but he's literally just there to act tough. And I would just be – I thought it showed how much dirt these guys are all into and how much they're okay with. The fact that he just went to this union guy like, yo, my brother – owes $2,700. I need you to come with me to this drug corner to help get him out of this shit. My first thought would be like, drugs? What the $23,000? I don't want anything to do with this drug corner. No, man, do that yourself.
Maybe I'm wrong, but I just took it as he's a black guy. I need a black guy with me when I go down to this corner. That's how I took it.
But the fact that he actually went.
Yeah, I mean that's true. And then when he goes there, you can tell he's a fish out of water too, man. He's like, "You're gonna get me shot over this?" So
Cheese definitely wants his money, Nick tries to work out some sort of a deal and tells him that the car is worth $3,000. So you keep the car, save Ziggy's life, and
actually, he was going to take the car back and sell it and give him the money.
Right.
Yeah.
And she says that's not gonna work out, but he is gonna give Ziggy 1 more week to pay up, and tells him that car is not worth $3,000 anymore. And we can see some lights kind of coming from around the corner, and Nick goes to walk around the corner, and the car is on fire.
I gotta say the timing of that was very good, because as he says it, the smoke starts billowing, and then you see it out the corner of the frame, and then they turn the corner and you see it on fire. Now, is this the same fire from the opening sequence? Is that the same fire, or is it a different fire? Because when I saw the smoke and the fire, I'm like, oh, maybe this is that fire at the end of the opening sequence down in the hole in the beginning. You know, it ends with a shot of something on fire. Is it, or is it a different fire?
I think different fire.
Okay, got it.
Now we get to Maui and Beadie in the diner or deli or wherever they are. And this is where we really get the information in detail about their relationship. The fact that, one, Maui very much cares for Beadie, and they dated at some point. I got the impression that it wasn't much of anything, and he just wanted to go further, and she didn't really want to go any further at all. And okay. I say that because, you know, she was married, and so I feel like this wasn't any type of a long-term thing. I felt like this was her as a single mother trying a relationship with a guy that works in the area she patrols, and she wasn't into it, and he never got over that.
Yeah, I mean, she kind of says, why does it ever not work out? So she's kind of very, like, she almost doesn't remember why it didn't work out, right? She doesn't have a reason for it. So I agree with you in that regard. But she also
uses like the words of death for any guy that likes a girl. I think she calls him a nice guy.
Oh, okay. Yeah, she does. But in context, she calls him a nice guy to kind of butter him up, to give him information about what's going on at the docks. So I don't think she meant it as more of you're a friend zone guy. It just more so meant it like, hey, I need information, and I know you're a decent human being who had nothing to do with the murders. So let me catch whoever did, because I know you had nothing to do with it.
I thought this made Maui look sad. I know it might be hard for you to really wrap your head around it now that because you're just realizing that was the same guy that we saw last episode, doing these really sophomoric bully tactics. It really felt like, you know, high school with Maui and Ziggy, with messing up his coat but I thought that Maui came with this context. I thought Maui, number one, comes off truly as a bully who's unhappy in his own life. But I thought he came off really sad and somewhat pathetic.
I don't know. Yeah, like you're right. It may not have connected to me yet, but I'm definitely watching Maui closer now that I realize he's had a story arc, and he wasn't just an opening scene. So.
But this is where, and you're not really sure how this is going to go. Right? Like you mentioned, you know, how she calls Maui nice, and she's definitely playing Maui and trying to, even though she's doing for the right reasons, in that he's not a murderer, he doesn't have anything to do with that stuff, which is funny, me calling him, you know, me labeling this guy, Maui, a bad guy, when he's not the guy. He's completely removed from these criminal activities.
Oh, man, last season you were right about D'Angelo, and I hadn't caught on to it yet, so I trust you. I'm watching Maui.
But so you're not really sure where it's going to go exactly, and he's talking about, like, you don't know what it's like, and I'm not going to, you know, it seems like he's not going to say anything, and then that's when, like you said earlier, he drops that line, you know, what you're looking for is right in front of you.
Yeah, and he kind of goes through the history of how stuff used to be on paper and pen, and now it's all digital, and again, he dry snitches. He doesn't want to be a snitch, but he kind of does. So.
And yeah, lays out that everything's on this computer now.
Yeah.
And you can't throw it away. That's what they used to do. They write it down, throw it away once there's no problem, but there's no way to get rid of it. And right away, Beadie goes and holds his hand and thanks him, still kind of playing him a little bit.
But you know, she may need more info from him down the line, right? I mean, that's a point to assume. So
Nick tells Ziggy that there's good news and bad news. Bad news is they're still going to kill him. Cheese is still going to kill Ziggy. They're going to wait a week to do it. But the good news is Ziggy can cancel his car insurance.
Yeah. Hey, man, insurance is expensive, so I'm not mad at that.
Herc now is shining here. Herc meets up to get 2 red tops from some white drug dealers. And he's taunting Kima and Carver the entire time on the mic with his prop, with his toothpick, making hand-to-hands. We get a montage here, a Herc montage, making hand-to-hands all over with different crews, different outfits. Kima and Carver are snapping from different locations, the window, the roof. And Carver is getting pretty annoyed with Herc's director's commentary.
Yeah, he's like, I might take that toothpick and stick it in his eye or something. He's definitely getting tired of her. So
the Greek is with Spiros. He's trying to get an update on what's going on. Asks about the grand jury. Says nobody talks. Spiros checked. So we know that Spiros is doing a little bit of work behind the scenes, not just taking Nick's word for it, but has some sort of connections himself with the grand jury in the courts to be able to find out that the port dockers are trustworthy.
Right. Which is important because, the Greek, we've seen that he's ruthless when he needs to be. So, and Spiros.
And upon hearing that, Frank doesn't want to do business, the Greek says to double Frank's pay to help with the fees and let the money talk. He is not going to meet with Frank Sabatka.
No, he has no desire to meet with him in person.
Stringer tells Avon about what's going on with the product in jail, says that the shit is weak and Eastside is strong. Names a couple people, specifically Prop Joe, and says that it's going to be hard to hold on to the towers without product. Yeah,
now you don't have to answer this, but they make mention of a Jamaican cat also who's a player there. So it's Prop Joe, someone else, and this Jamaican cat who Avon knows right away. He's like, oh, this is such and such. So I feel like they're planting a seed for me. You don't got to respond, but I feel like they're planting a seed for me there.
Avon's going to work on more supply, and Stringer asks about D'Angelo. He wants an update on the inside from Avon's side, and Avon says he's got to find his own way. And Stringer wants to keep reaching out, put some real estate in D'Angelo's name. Avon says to go for it, and Avon asks, this is where I thought this is the first time we kind of see Avon deviate a little bit, where he asked Stringer, push come to shove, I've been fair to him, haven't I? And Stringer says he's been more than fair.
Yeah, so it's almost like Stringer is inceptioning Avon here, the idea to kill D'Angelo, at least in my opinion.
I think that the phrase he uses too fair, actually. Too fair. Which sounds even more daunting.
Right.
Spiros meets with Frank, and Frank is pissed that it's not the Greek. He tries to leave, but I thought it was funny because Frank tries to threaten to leave, and Spiros is talking, and Frank is still mad. But his way of showing his madness is to just turn out into the water. Instead of actually walking away, he just stands there and just stares out into the water, doesn't leave, which I thought felt like what Spiros eventually gets to, and this is our quote, as far as they used to make Steele there, no? Frank can't leave. Frank needs the Greek.
Yeah, that income is really bolstering his whole crew because business isn't what it used to be. They've already got a client who's unhappy after Nick stole a whole can from them, so they do need the Greek. It's unfortunate, but it's true.
Frank does not really, we don't get it like a real answer in this case, but Frank seems to not be into wanting to work with them anymore, despite what they were going to offer with the double.
Which is double, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Ziggy and Nick are looking up chemicals on the internet at the library, and you were cracking up at this, and it's more of what we talked about earlier, kind of like these scenes where someone's teaching, but it's Ziggy now teaching instead of digital cameras. Ziggy's now teaching Nick about the internet and Google.
Yeah. You can just type in wherever you want, it comes up.
So they're looking what these chemicals are for, and it looks like it's to process cocaine.
Yeah, so they've done their research and they've seen that that's what it looks to be for. Yes.
Bunk and Beadie are meeting with the docs, and we get to see, it looks like the more corporate side, but I imagine this is in the Checker area where Maui works, where their buddy Johnny 50 was, because this is a very, indoor, air-conditioned, clean, very bright office type of buildings. And
yeah, this is the collar section of the docks.
Bunk and Beadie want to know how these cans work, like Maui told them. He wants to know how these cans work. And so the guy that they're talking to, which I assume was kind of like the real boss, he brings them to Frank and makes Frank, after this tense conversation they just had a few scenes back now, Frank has to explain to them how this all works with these cans. And I thought this was really, I just thought really interesting in the way that Frank continues to evolve in how he plays defense against against Bunk and Beadie and the investigation as a whole, going from last episode of panic attack to beginning of this episode of pure anger to this one extremely smug.
Yeah, at this point he's like, hey, you guys need help, I'll help you find nothing that you're gonna find. So I do like Frank's different levels of emotion and how the circumstances dictate it. So,
and Beadie and Bunk get the lowdown, and we get to kind of listen in, much like when Herc and Carver don't know what the fuck they were talking about last season, and Freeman would have to explain. Frank explains to Bunk and Beadie how these cans work, and that every time a can comes in, someone enters it into the system. It gets put into a specific type of stack, and they assume, Bunk and Beadie then assume, well, that's what you're doing then. You're not putting it in a stack, so you just say it gets lost so no one knows where it is, and it disappears, and stolen stuff or dead girls get shipped off. And this is when the smugness really comes in. He goes, well, maybe, but also, fat fingers. Wearing gloves. Wintertime, your hands are completely numb. Radio waves get knocked out, and you think you entered it, and it never went into the system. All these things could happen. But Frank gives us, I thought, some interesting stats. 160 boxes go missing. Last time they did inventory, they came up 300 light. So he's saying, and he doesn't get defensive here, because Beadie says, is that what happened? And he says, I don't know what happened to those girls in the can.
That's what he's saying. He's saying so much going on here. I'm managing so much that I couldn't know if I wanted to know, is what he's kind of saying. And then this legit.
And he answers the other question about the can that I thought was really important from just a writing standpoint to kind of close up to answer so that the cops don't look stupid. They ask, well, what about the broken seal? Because the seal was broken, which means someone opened the can, which means they had to know what was in there. And Frank says, you might notice it, you might not. And from a layman, what he says is, you're absolutely right. You're on this big ship. There's all these cans. You see it. Maybe you don't. It can happen. Who knows?
Right. Yeah, so it's Frank made a lot of great defense, but that point about the seal, which came from Beadie, if I'm not correct, was kind of like a little bit of a loose end, if I'll use a better word, loose end.
Bunk is not buying it. He says they're playing them. McNulty goes to meet the girls in the prison that are being detained from the sex worker bust in Jersey. They're all getting sent back home to Russia, and yeah, he's going to ask them, basically, does anyone know this floater or any of these girls from the can?
And one girl asks, if I recognize someone, can I get out? Right?
Mm-hmm. We get to that. It goes back later, but yeah, let's just get through it. It's that he's trying to get something, and he was kind of he was warned that, unless you can give them something or get them to stay in the country, you're probably not going to get any answers from them. And sure enough, there's kind of a leader of the group that speaks a little bit of English. But once McNulty can't offer them any type of amnesty, nobody speaks.
Right.
McNulty wasted his time. I thought it was interesting that the Homeland Security guy kept asking, you're really going to come up there on your own time? Come up your own time? And then he completely whiffs and strikes out on this entire inquisition. And the last thing the guy says is, sorry, you wasted your time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stringer is explaining that Death Grip is not shit to the group.
Right. So this is our second Bodhi appearance of the episode.
So this is like the start of something really cool that begins to happen on the show, with some great dialogue where Stringer is almost holding class.
So this happens again. He has these classes often. Okay, good to know.
This seems to be, but it's it's not class, I know, but this is like the official meeting for the drug dealers, for his crew, for the Barksdale crew.
Yeah, it's a conference call. Yeah.
And he's explaining, he's taking the role of the teacher, and he's saying, what do we do with Death Grip, right? He's giving this analogy, and he tries to talk about WorldCom, and the analogy, and we talked about this right after watching the show. The analogy that he gives that finally clicks is, you have warrants, you get arrested, you're clean, but they're going to run your name to make sure that they can let you go. What do? And instantly you got to come up with another name. And
Bodie got.
And Shamrock, I think it was Poot that said, that maybe.
Oh, was it? Okay.
I think so, because then Shamrock says, well, that's what we got to do with Death Grip. We got to change the name. Or someone says that. It might have been, but I don't know. But Shamrock says, like, oh, we could even, like, change the gel caps. Or change a gel cap. And that's when Bodie says, we could give different names to different crews in the Barksdales so that the pit and the towers all seem like they're competing.
Yeah. Yep. So it's a smart little business plan that they have, which Stringer kind of inspired. And again, he did a lot of incepting this episode, man. He let them run with it, even though he already had the idea in his head, but he let them come to it on their own so that they can feel like it was theirs. So
Spiros lies to Nick that there was no problem with Frank, even though we know that Frank has shut down orders on the docks. But Spiros tells Nick that the rate is 3 times the pay per can. And Nick insists on knowing before they go further with this chemical gig. He wants to know what these chemicals are for, and he confronts them flat out and says it's for processing cocaine, isn't it? And Spiros kind of acknowledges like a nonverbal yes, and Nick is cool with that. Nick's totally down with that and says he can get it by the end of the week.
Yeah, so he's getting deeper and deeper, and we're presumed that he's motivated by the desire to get his house, right? This is what's motivating him.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, being utterly embarrassed to not even be able to buy his aunt's old house in his old neighborhood now.
Yeah.
What he was doing is not enough. And he changed so quick from last time not wanting to get involved in any drugs. Now he's going to get involved with at least getting chemicals for drugs.
Yeah, he's helping with the manufacturing of cocaine. That's bigger than anything Ziggy was even trying to do. So
Bunk and Freeman and Beadie want a computer to trace the cans.
Mm-hmm.
And they're running this by Daniels, that this is how they want to basically advance the investigation. And Daniels says that he wants nothing to do with the cans, with the docks. He wants to stay specifically with Frank Sabatka and whatever dirt he may or may not be doing right now. That is drugs. But he wants nothing to do with getting a clone computer to trace where these dead girls maybe came from. And he says that case is a loser. And Bunk and Freeman are trying to tell him that homicide is not the place to, as they say, sprawl a case, and that Rawls and Jay just want a really quick shake. And we saw that from last season. Every chance they could to shut it down and get quick arrests for the sake of the stats, they took it.
Yeah. So it's kind of Bunk is kind of here playing Rawls against Daniels in a little bit, not like directly, but he's telling him how it is.
And what they're able to get from Daniels is I think a pretty good compromise in that they can set up there. Bunk can set up in the detail. They can share information, but the murders have to stay with homicide. But Daniels gives a little caveat and says, unless there's a suspect.
Yeah, Daniels is smart, man. I can't say it enough. So
he's learning from last season.
Yeah.
Nick gives Frank the cans that are coming in from the Greek. And this is where Frank goes, what the fuck? I told him that we're off. And Nick says, yeah, but the Greek said you were on. He said triple the rate. And that's when Frank really can't deny it anymore and gives a signal that Horse has to get onto the Wilhelmina so he can get the cans. He can get the dirty cans in. And he says, we got ships today. But Nick says to Frank, the writing's on the fucking wall, meaning that he's acknowledged basically that the docks are a dead business. But Frank, we know Frank is doing this for the union. There's no personal profit in this for him. And I think that his final line of fuck the wall, that's him saying he's going to bust that. He's going to make sure that the docks make it no matter what. So that's how we end it. Yeah,
so it's weird. The Wire always has these kind of flat endings. And I don't want to say flat to make it sound negative, but it's never a cliffhanger except for maybe Kima getting shot. It's never like this, oh my God, I got to tune in next week. It's very much a conversation piece that almost buttons up a storyline. And I think that's a really interesting choice. I don't see that from any other shows. So consistently, The Wire ends their episodes with some sort of closing line with a wide shot that lets it sit in your head with what did he just say and what does it mean. So another solid ending, another solid episode.
So let's look at what we got then. We've got the homicide and the detail really coming together now by the end of this with Daniel's approval to be kind of one here. So Beadie has worked her own CI. Bunk and Freamon are now joining the detail in some form, at least. Freeman's unofficially, Bunk is unofficial. They're able to share information. They're going to work now on getting DNRs, phone taps, assuming there's no problems with that, it seems. That's just going to kind of keep moving forward. And they're going to get this clone computer to track the cans and how they're moving things. I thought a pretty powerful episode for the police.
Yeah, I mean, and then you didn't even mention McNulty got Omar to testify. That's also a win for law enforcement. So, yeah, I think if we're law enforcement, Barksdale crew, and the docs, definitely I think it was a win for law enforcement this week.
Yeah, the streets really having nothing yet. I think right now it really is dependent on how it works out for them as far as their two biggest threats of losing product and territory and also losing control of D'Angelo. These are two things that they're working on, and I think they're at a closer point of solving the product problem. While they're not going to be able to get better product right now, they're at least going to have a better strategy to market the product. So that'll be interesting, but they have no answers for D'Angelo. Yeah,
and then the real estate thing is just a shot in the dark, but really, yeah, D'Angelo, they lost this week. They have the most, they have the most L's this week, the Barksdale crew, for sure.
And the docs, I think because of what's going on with Nick specifically, the fact that he's now circumvented his uncle and he's allowed the Greek to split him off of the family, essentially, to where they're double dipping into the business with these drugs, and also now with the cans where they've offered this triple rate to Frank, who's got to take it. But I gotta think he would not be comfortable with the drug aspect.
Yeah, I don't think so either. So.
All right, so that's pretty much it. We'll see where it goes from there for season 2, episode 6. The prologue.
All right. Thanks for joining us. This has been my first watch.
It's my rewatch.
All right. See you next week.
Later.